This is Alarm Will, our video series in which we try to get to know a composer on our terms. I'm Gavin, I'm the manager of Alarm Will Sound, and I'm here today with Amy Beth Kirsten, composer, and our trombonist, Mike Clayville, for an episode we're calling Alarm Will Lift, in which Mike and I try to get to know Amy's music, while Amy and I learn about powerlifting from Mike.
I'm thinking about technique and form and efficiency. I compare it a lot to performance. So I think of it in terms of musical performance. And so it doesn't seem like a very subtle activity, but I think there's a lot of nuance in it. And there's a lot of things that you can tweak and kind of make as efficient as possible.
What's your physical exercise regime?
I think it varies based on how I have no work-life balance, and so I'm when I'm in work mode, I'm working, and so I'm trying to change that now. And so I am starting to train for a 2,300-mile bike ride.
That sounds pretty intense.
It's going to take me 6 weeks. It's not like this is, I'm not going for speed or anything. I'm going for, I want to live to see the end.
Awesome. That's the best so far.
Okay.
And there's a
Cool.
right now, but
Yeah.
looking good.
I am not an athlete in any way. You are way too nice.
Oh,
Yeah,
well, you're doing it too well. I can't, there's nothing to critique.
He just says that because I signed the checks.
Can you get it lower? Try to get. Oh, like that. Yeah.
So you grew up in a household with rock music playing,
Yeah.
and you had this jazz drum instructor. Talk about that and growing up in that environment and how much it shows up in your music now or not.
Well, I think all of it shows up somehow. I mean, I think it's part of any person's DNA. The experiences that they have when they're throughout their life, and so, I came to love music through rock music, and I didn't really discover classical music in any kind of serious way until I was in 6th grade when I started taking piano lessons, and I was like, wow, there's this whole other world out there. But still, it wasn't. I was young, and I didn't know that I could research and find out about classical music. So when I went to high school and college, I started to discover more things, and then I found jazz and started working with Janice Borla and Jack Mouse, who are wonderful jazz musicians, and they sort of took me under their wing. And I learned a lot from them because I went through a program that they ran for my undergraduate degree, and I was basically studying vocal jazz. And I was at the beginning of the program, the beginning of my experience, I was the only singer in the program, so I was put with horns. And so I basically thought of my voice and myself as a horn player. Yeah, so that has a particular bearing on the way I write music now, and also the way that I think about voice in a piece of music. So, I sing everything when I'm composing, and I record myself singing, even if it's a piece for Alarm Will Sound. I sung all those parts. If I'm writing a string quartet, whatever, I'm singing all the time and recording myself in Logic and kind of manipulating the sounds and that sort of thing. So that kind of improvisation, that kind of thinking of my voice as an instrument is my entry into classical music. That's very good, Gavin. Am I supposed to be holding my breath?
You can be eventually right now.
Okay, yeah, no.
I'm actually curious, but you talk a little bit more your voice as horn. Like you thought of it that way. What does that mean?
Well, so quite like literally, I went through the same program that a trumpet player would go through. So all the jazz juries, I'd have to learn all the scales, all the different jazz scales. I'd have to learn rhythm changes and the patterns that fit in rhythm changes. And I'd have to sing through all of those in all different keys, up and down the scale, whatever. And it was incredible ear training, first of all, and just conceptually it was also really good training. I mean, one of the things that was really cool was we had a group called the Vocal Jazz Consort, and it was, I think there were 5 or 6 people in the group. In the early years, I was the only vocalist, and the teacher Janice brought in other instrumentalists from the program. So there was a pianist and some horn players, and she would do things like we'd gather around for rehearsal, and on her way in, she'd grab a piece of art off the wall at the school, and she'd bring a painting in, and she'd say, "We're going to sing the painting," and we'd all be like, what the heck? What do we do? But it was amazing training, because it created this situation in which this small community of people had to figure out spontaneously how we were going to create something that made sense musically, that represented to us the painting. And so it was more about training our listening skills as much as it was training our, the way we express something. And so listening to somebody else's idea, letting that spark an idea, shutting up, and then listening to how somebody else is responding to you. And I'll shut up now.
Another thing about voice is text.
Oh yeah.
And you're a published poet.
Yeah.
And your works, at least the works you've written for Alarm with Sound, Drink Me, which we did at the very first Mizzou International Composers Festival.
That's right.
And now this piece, Jacob in Chains. You're writing words, you're setting loads of music, you're crafting narratives, and you're working in something you call composed theater.
Right.
And tell us about that.
Yeah, so I was really happy to come upon this term a couple years ago. These guys in Berlin who wrote a book called Composed Theater, which kind of tracks all the threads of this particular thing that are going on in Europe. And so it basically for me is a way of thinking about music performance as a theatrical event kind of thing. And you can think about it like this. When you go into a concert hall, the lights go down, and suddenly, reality is suspended for a moment, and that's theater. And so that was kind of, the spark for me was that idea, but in more kind of more deeply about the concept of composed theater has to do with how a piece is made. So it's not about a composer being a hermit in a room behind a closed door by themselves. It's about, taking a work in progress to the musicians so that they can experience it, so that I can see them in their bodies playing the music. And there's this kind of amazing exchange of energy and ideas. And so the process of composing becomes like a performance itself, because you're seeing these little pieces, people are responding to them, and you're as an artist, that experience enters into the way that the piece is made. So it's a kind of slower version of composing, because you have to wait for all this exchange to happen. But I find it's really, really fruitful for me, and I love hearing about how what I'm doing is what it means to other people who are playing it, people who are experiencing it, because oftentimes someone much smarter than me will have a response to something, and I'll be like, wow, that's really amazing. I'm going to take that and run with that idea, because I think it actually means something a little bit different, but for me, it'll create something else, Feet are closer together. Your hands are right here in the same spot.
Yeah, they're going to be as close as you can get them together. To your benefit. Figure it out.
Okay.
That work?
Yeah.
It's interesting that you mentioned seeing it in the bodies. So there's a great clip online of Don Quixote with the medical scene.
Oh yeah,
and then you talked about, for Jacob in Chains, Richard Crawford is an actor who draws from his body.
Yeah.
Is that physicality pointed? Did you do that in a way that was intentional?
For this scene,
For
or
both, actually, for Richard and Don Quixote.
Don Quixote. Yeah, well, I mean Don Quixote, or the piece is called Quixote, but it's inspired by the Cervantes. But yeah, that, I was trying to figure out how to make a piece for 4 percussionists and 3 singers, in which they weren't buried behind a bunch of instruments on the stage, and so I had to figure out how to give them tuning forks that they could play the set and so free up their physicality. And so that was a real big part of the concept. For Jacob, yeah, I mean, I think I'm not sure who is going to actually end up portraying the character of Jacob. Richard is with us for the workshops, but one of the things I really loved about him is the experience that he has as a Lecoq-based actor, which is all about how the body expresses an emotion. So most actors actually start from, your personal experience and the emotions that you have, and how is that going to translate into a character. But with Richard, he's actually thinking about, okay, well, if you're thinking about a thing that made you sad and you come on stage and you try and act sad, that's great. But if your body doesn't look sad, then we're not going to actually know, And so I think that it's a beautiful thing, and it's a mystery to me how yet it's all going to evolve, this idea with this piece. But so that's one of the things I'm really looking forward to, is seeing how he responds in the moment, what he does with his body to do that, to evoke what he's feeling and what the character's feeling.
Well, it was great to do things with our bodies today in the gym. I'm sure I was poetry in motion. I'm not sure what the emotion was. It may have been utter shame. It could have been just, let's try this. But thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for showing us how to perform.
Michael.
Thank you. And we really, really enjoy doing work with you, and we look forward to Jacob in Chains and more music making.
It's an honor to be with you guys.